Welcome.
This happened during my junior year of high school, around late 2017. I was on the varsity basketball team, and like a lot of guys trying to prove themselves, I stayed late after practice almost every day. It wasn't anything crazy. I just liked having the gym to myself. No noise, no pressure, just me and the sound of the ball hitting the floor. Our school wasn't huge, but the gym was in a separate building across a courtyard. During the day it was fine, but at night it felt like a completely different place. Once everyone left, it got quiet in a way that didn't feel normal. That night, practice ended around 7:30. We had a game the next day, so coach kept it short. As soon as he dismissed us, everyone grabbed their stuff and headed out. A couple of guys asked if I was staying, and I said yeah, same as always. Coach stopped by the door on his way out and told me, "Lock up when you're done, and don't stay too long." I told him I wouldn't. Within 5 minutes, I was completely alone. At first, it felt normal. I had my headphones in, just shooting around. The gym lights buzzed faintly overhead, and every shot echoed across the walls. It was actually kind of peaceful. After a while, I took my headphones off. That's when I really noticed how quiet it was. No voices, no doors, no cars outside, just the sound of the ball bouncing and my own footsteps. I checked the clock, around 7:50. I figured I'd take a few more shots and head out. That's when something felt off. It's hard to explain, but it was like that sudden awareness you get when you feel like someone's watching you. I turned around and looked toward the bleachers, half expecting to see someone sitting there. Nothing, just empty rows and shadows. I shook it off and kept shooting. A few minutes later, I missed a shot, and the ball bounced hard off the rim and rolled toward the hallway leading to the locker rooms. I jogged over to grab it. As I got closer to the hallway, I heard something, a faint noise, like metal hitting metal. I stopped. Then I heard it again, a locker slamming shut. I just stood there for a second, staring down the hallway. My first thought was that one of the guys came back for something. It wouldn't have been that weird. "Yo," I called out. "Is someone still here?" No response. I waited a few seconds, expecting to hear movement or a voice. Nothing. I picked up the ball and slowly walked down the hallway toward the locker room. The lights were still on, just like I left them. Everything looked normal at first. I stepped inside. That's when I noticed my locker. It was slightly open. I was 100% sure I had closed it earlier. I always did. I walked over and opened it all the way. My bag was still there, but something about it felt wrong. My hoodie, which I had stuffed in the bottom, was now sitting on top. My water bottle had been moved to the side. It wasn't a huge change, but it was enough to know someone had gone through it. That's when I felt it. That heavy, sinking feeling in your stomach when your brain finally catches up to what's happening. Someone had been in there. Recently. I slowly turned around and looked toward the showers. The curtain was mostly closed, but not all the way. There was a small gap, and I swear, for a split second, I thought I saw something move behind it. I froze. I stared at the curtain, trying to figure out if I imagined it. Then it moved again, just slightly, not like it was falling or shifting, like something behind it had brushed against it. I didn't say anything this time. I didn't call out. I just stood there, completely still, listening. That's when I heard it. A faint sound. Breathing. It was quiet, but it was there. Slow and uneven. Coming from behind the curtain. My chest tightened, and I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. Every instinct in my body was telling me the same thing. Get out. I started backing up slowly, trying not to make any noise. As I reached the doorway, my shoe squeaked slightly against the floor. The breathing stopped. Completely. The silence that followed was worse than anything. Then, footsteps. Barefoot. Quick, light steps on the tile. Coming straight toward the curtain. I didn't wait to see anything else. I turned and ran. I pushed through the door, sprinted down the hallway, and didn't stop until I was outside in the parking lot under the lights. I turned around, expecting someone to come running out after me. But the door stayed closed. No movement. No sound. It was like the building was empty. I stood there for a minute, trying to catch my breath. My hands were shaking, and I could barely think straight. I thought about my bag still inside, but there was no way I was going back in there alone. So I left. I didn't tell anyone that night. I just went home and tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe someone broke in and ran out. Maybe I imagined the breathing. But deep down, I knew I didn't. The next morning, I got to school early and went straight to the gym. Coach was already there setting things up. I told him what happened, trying to sound calm about it. He didn't laugh. He didn't brush it off. He just stared at me for a second and asked, "You sure you locked the main doors?" I told him, "Yeah, I always did." That's when he said something that made my stomach drop. "The side entrance was unlocked this morning," he said. "I know I locked it last night." We walked into the locker room together. Everything looked normal at first. My bag was still in my locker, exactly where I left it. But then Coach stopped near the showers. "Hold up," he said. The curtain was fully open now, and the floor underneath it was wet. Not just damp, like someone had been standing there recently. There were footprints. Bare footprints. Clear as day. They started at the shower drain, then led across the tile floor, past the benches, straight to my locker. And then, they stopped, right in front of it. Coach didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then he quietly said, "We need to call this in." Later that day, we found out something else. There were security cameras covering the outside entrances. The footage from that night showed someone entering through the side door around 7:40, right after everyone left. The problem was, they never showed up leaving. This happened during my senior year of high school, about a month before graduation. I was taking a pretty heavy course load, and one of my classes required a final project that counted for almost half the grade. I had been putting it off for weeks, so I finally decided to stay after school one day and just get it done. Most students left around 3:30, and by 4 o'clock the building was already starting to feel empty. Teachers were still around, but you could tell everyone was winding down. I stayed in one of the upstairs classrooms because it was quiet and had computers I needed. My plan was simple: finish everything before it got too late. Around 5 o'clock, my teacher stopped by and told me she was heading out. She asked if I'd be okay locking up the classroom when I left. I said yeah, no problem. I'd done it before. At that point, I didn't think anything of it. After she left, the building got noticeably quieter. Not completely silent, but the usual background noise was gone. No talking, no lockers slamming, no footsteps in the hallway. Just that low hum of the lights. I kept working for a while, completely focused. Time passed faster than I expected. When I finally checked my phone, it was a little after 6:30. That's when I realized I hadn't heard a single sound in a long time. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It felt empty. I got up to stretch and walked over to the classroom door. I opened it slightly and looked out into the hallway. The lights were still on, but only every other one. The rest were off, leaving these long stretches of shadow between them. The hallway looked way longer than it did during the day. I didn't see anyone. I figured maybe the janitors were on a different floor, so I didn't think much of it. I went back inside and kept working. About 10 minutes later, I heard something. A sound from the hallway. It was faint, but it was definitely there. Like a locker door closing somewhere in the distance. I froze for a second and looked toward the door. Then I told myself it was probably just a janitor or maybe a teacher grabbing something they forgot. Still, it felt off. I got up again and opened the door wider this time. I stepped out into the hallway and looked both ways. Nothing. No movement. No sound. I even walked a little farther down, checking around the corner. Still nothing. That's when I noticed something weird. One of the lockers about halfway down the hall was slightly open. Just barely. I stared at it for a second, trying to remember if it had been like that earlier. I couldn't. I started walking toward it slowly. The closer I got, the more uneasy I felt. It wasn't just the locker, it was the silence around it. When I reached it, I stood there for a few seconds before pulling it open. It was empty. Completely empty. No books, no bag, nothing. Just a dark metal interior. I let go of the door, and it creaked slightly as it closed on its own. That's when I heard it again. Another sound. this time closer. A soft noise, like footsteps, coming from farther down the hallway. I turned my head slowly and looked toward the darker end of the corridor. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I noticed it. A figure, standing at the very end. It was hard to make out details because of the lighting, but I could clearly see the outline of a person. They weren't moving, just standing there, watching. I felt my chest tighten. "Hello," I called out. No response. The figure didn't move, didn't react at all. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to figure out what I was looking at. Maybe it was a teacher, maybe a janitor, but something about it didn't feel right. The posture was off, too still. I took a step back, and that's when it moved. Not toward me, just slightly to the side, like it had shifted its weight. That was enough for me. I turned and walked back to the classroom, trying not to panic. Once I got inside, I shut the door and locked it. My hands were shaking a little. I told myself I was overreacting. It was probably just someone messing around. Still, I couldn't focus anymore. After a couple minutes, I decided to pack up and leave. As I was putting my stuff together, I heard something else. This time, it was right outside the classroom. A soft dragging sound, like something being pulled across the floor. I stopped moving. The sound got closer. Then it stopped, right at the door. I stared at the handle, waiting, hoping it wouldn't move. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the handle twitched, just slightly, like someone had tested it. My heart started pounding. I didn't make a sound. The handle moved again, this time a little more. But the door didn't open. It was locked. After a few seconds, it stopped. Then I heard footsteps again, walking away, slow, calm. I waited a full minute before moving. Then I grabbed my bag and went to the window. It overlooked the parking lot, completely empty. No cars, no people, nothing. At that point, I didn't care about anything else. I just wanted out. I unlocked the door and stepped into the hallway. It was empty. The locker from earlier was now fully closed. I didn't even look down the hallway where I saw the figure. I just walked the other direction, fast. When I reached the stairwell, I pushed the door open and started going down. Halfway down, I heard a noise above me. Footsteps. On the floor I just left, walking toward the stairs. I didn't stop. I kept going. Faster. By the time I reached the bottom, I was basically running. I pushed through the exit door and got outside. The cold air hit me immediately. I didn't stop moving until I reached the edge of the parking lot. When I finally turned around, I looked up at the building. One of the classroom lights on the second floor was on, the same one I had been in, and standing in the window was a silhouette, perfectly still, watching me. I never stayed after school again after that. A few days later, I mentioned it to one of the staff. They told me something I wish I never heard. Apparently, a few years before I transferred there, a student had been found dead in one of the upstairs classrooms after staying late. They never released many details, just that he had been alone. At least, that's what they thought. This happened when I was a sophomore, and it's still one of the only things from high school I can't explain, no matter how much I try to make sense of it. I had detention after school for skipping a class earlier that week. It wasn't a big deal. I'd had detention before, but this time felt different right from the start. There were only 4 of us assigned that day. The room was an old classroom on the first floor, near the back of the building, where barely anyone went unless they had to. Our supervisor was a substitute teacher I'd never seen before. He was older, probably in his late 50s, and didn't say much. When we walked in, he just told us to sit down, stay quiet, and that we'd be dismissed at 5 o'clock. At first, everything was normal. Everyone kept to themselves. One girl was doing homework, another guy had his head down like he was sleeping, and the last kid was just scrolling on his phone under the desk. I tried to do some work, but honestly I was just watching the clock. Around 4:15, the teacher stood up and said he needed to step out for a minute. He told us not to leave the room. Then he walked out and closed the door behind him. At first, nothing seemed weird. A few minutes passed, then 10. No one really said anything. Then the guy with his head down suddenly looked up and asked, "Yo, how long has he been gone?" No one answered right away. The girl checked her phone and said, like 10 minutes? That felt longer than it should have been. Another 5 minutes passed. Still no teacher. That's when the lights flickered. Just once, but enough for everyone to notice. The room went quiet after that. I remember looking at the door, expecting him to walk back in, but it didn't move. Then we heard something from the hallway. Footsteps. Slow. Dragging slightly. They didn't sound like normal walking. It was uneven, like one foot was being pulled. The footsteps passed by the door, then stopped. Right outside. No one moved. We all just stared at the door, waiting. The handle didn't turn. No one knocked. The footsteps just stayed there. After a few seconds, we heard something else. A faint scratching sound, like nails dragging lightly across the door. One of the girls whispered, "What is that?" No one answered. The scratching stopped. Then came 3 slow knocks. Not loud, but very deliberate. We all looked at each other. "Is that him?" someone asked. It didn't sound like a teacher. No one got up to open it. Another pause. Then the handle slowly turned. All of us froze. The door creaked open just a few inches. But no one was standing there. The hallway outside was empty. The lights were dim, and there was no movement. "Dude, close it," someone whispered. But no one moved. The door stayed slightly open for a few seconds. Then, it slowly closed on its own. That's when things stopped feeling normal. The guy who had been sleeping stood up and walked to the door. He opened it quickly and looked outside. "No one's there," he said. At that point, we all felt it. That same heavy feeling, like we weren't alone. Even though the room was empty, we decided to leave. We didn't care about detention anymore. We grabbed our stuff and walked into the hallway together. It was completely empty. Too empty. No teachers. No students. Nothing. The lights were dimmer than before, like only half of them were on. We started walking toward the main exit. That's when we heard the footsteps again. Behind us. Slow. Dragging. Getting closer. We turned around. There was no one there. But the sound didn't stop. It kept coming. One step at a time. Closing the distance. That's when we ran. All of us. We didn't even look back. We just ran down the hallway, turned the corner, and headed for the exit doors. Right before we reached them, I glanced back. And I wish I hadn't. At the far end of the hallway, where we came from, there was something there. A figure. Tall. Standing in the shadows. But it wasn't standing normally. Its posture was wrong. Tilted slightly. Like something wasn't aligned right. And even from that distance, I could tell it was facing us. We burst through the exit doors and didn't stop until we were outside. We stood there in the parking lot, trying to catch our breath. No one said anything for a minute. Then one of the girls asked, "Did you guys see that?" We all knew what she meant. No one said no. The next day, I asked one of the staff about the substitute teacher. They looked confused. They told me there wasn't any substitute assigned to detention that day, just a regular teacher. But he had called in sick, which meant there shouldn't have been anyone in that room with us.